I want to walk you through the best methodologies for approaching research for this particular assignment. Once your issue proposal is approved, then you're ready to begin research. Please be sure and look over, though, the annotated bibliography assignment. That particular assignment is to be done as you research. It is a form of bibliography in which you actually you're making a record of the sources that you consult. Even if you never use all of them in your paper, what I normally find is that most students, most beginning researchers especially, will stop, if the requirement's to have 5 sources, they'll stop at 5. And honestly, good research is going beyond that. So I think there's a little video that explains annotated bibliographies and what they do, and the format that I'm asking for from you is to put the bibliographic entry documented using APA. Of course, it should be alphabetized. Your entry should be alphabetized. If there's no author's name, then you go by the title of the article and by the first main word, not a, an, or the, and that's how you alphabetize, then the date, and so forth. And then just a paragraph that kind of summarizes your response, whether or not you think the article is useful. You can summarize the content, and you're supposed to have 8 to 10 separate entries. Okay. Now I want to talk to you about an option that's available to you called field research. Field research is when you yourself, you the writer, actually do a portion of the research. And I think on the guidelines for this assignment, it tells you that you can use one piece of field research, and that can count as one of your sources. The exception to that is if you have a lot of additional research, then you can use more than one. But for example, 1 out of 5 is logical to me. If you have, say, 8 different articles you're going to use, then it's fine to me as well if you want to use more than one piece of field research. Please notice that it's not required, but I want you to be aware of it. There are 3 different types of field research, okay? And here's the definition. We're going to be using any activity aimed at collecting primary, original, or otherwise unavailable data using methods such as, and these are the 3 types: interviews, surveys, and observations. Okay. So let me see if I can get this to advance. All right. Interviews can be person-to-person, email, or on the phone, but they're a bit more formal than just chatting casually. You normally prepare for them in advance. You prepare questions. You you make an appointment with the person in advance before you interview him or her, and then you conduct the interview, and then you kind of reflect on what you found out. I've had lots of students use interviews in their as a piece of field research in their papers. For example, I had a student who was arguing that he had young children, and he didn't believe that children under the age of 2 should be exposed to any television shows, even shows for children. And so he interviewed his pediatrician about the pediatrician's recommendations, and he used that information in the paper. I've had a student who I think I'd mentioned before, maybe in one of the live lectures, but she was concerned about the crime rate in her area, that the crime rates had spiked recently in the area in which she lived. And so she interviewed I guess it was the desk sergeant in that particular precinct, and got information and statistics and that kind of thing from him. So be aware, again, you want to arrange in advance. It doesn't have to be face-to-face, but you do want to sort of alert the person in advance. You want it to be someone with some authority who can speak to your subject, because remember, in building an argument, you are relying primarily on appeals to reason, to critical thinking, and that means things like stats and facts and expert testimony and that kind of thing. Observations are where you actually observe. You have certain goals from observations. Any of you who intend to go into education, one of the things that you will find is normally you take a course at the college level in a 4-year degree where you actually are assigned to a school classroom, and you go and you observe and you keep a journal and you write down everything that you observe. You don't actually participate in the class. It's just your job to be an observer and to learn from those observations. So that's just an example. So you can certainly set up an observation if that would be helpful to your research. For example, I had a student who wanted to argue about discipline. Her topic had to do with the correct ways to discipline children in a daycare setting. And so she worked in a daycare, but what she did was get permission to go into another teacher's classroom, and she observed the interactions there. She took notes about those, and then she included the information that she found in her paper. And then finally, surveys. And surveys have actually gotten kind of easier to conduct because of social media. I know, look, for example, in Facebook, you can set up different types of surveys. You compile a list of questions. You want them to be short and focused. You can decide an audience and the method of distribution. For example, I had a student who was in the military, and so she created a survey. It had to do with women in front lines combat. That was the issue that she wanted to argue. She distributed within her particular platoon, I guess it was, this survey, and then tallied the results and analyzed them and included the results in her paper. Now, the thing about surveys is you want to make sure that you're not specifically targeting people who will agree with whatever the findings are that you want to see. You want more of a broader range, so you've got to be careful about your methodology there. Please do not hesitate to contact me, though, if you're interested in doing any of these and need more guidance. I'll be glad to help you with that. However, for the most part, most students are going to be using a method of doing what's really more secondary research. Primary sources are the original sources. So, for example, if you are writing about literature, which in this case nobody is, this isn't a literature class, but if you're writing about literature, the short story itself would be the primary source. Criticism written by some scholar would be secondary sources, okay? So most of what you're going to be reading are secondary sources unless the author of the article or web page actually did the research him or herself and is reporting on what he or she found. Okay. Now, I realize in the library scavenger hunt, I kind of sent you a certain direction in accessing the databases. We have just gone through, and by we I mean GNTC faculty and staff have just gone through an orientation with the librarian, because a lot of what they're doing is now shifting, and they recommend that we use Primo not just to find books, okay, but also to find articles. So I'm going to show you, it actually does sort of cut down on the number of steps it takes to access databases. The reason that I'm strongly recommending that you use the GNTC databases or information found through Primo for your papers is because it's already vetted. You don't have to worry about, is this information reliable? Okay, remember, and we're going to talk about a Google search in just a second, but remember that if you use Google or a popular search engine, then it's on you, the writer, to take extra steps to make sure that the information is, for example, not biased, recent enough, written by credible sources, has some depth to it, and so forth. Okay, so using Primo, I'm going to show you how to do a search, and I'm going to use let's just say that I want to do something with cyberbullying. So I'm going to select Primo to launch it. And this may take a minute because, of course, there's high usage right now for online sources. I'm going to type my search term here, and then select the search icon. Now, I'm going to move this over so that you can see. I want to refine my results, because you notice I got 19,000, almost 20,000 hits. And so I want to narrow this down as much as possible to the types of sources that I want to use. So I'm going to select, I'm not requiring that you use peer-reviewed journals. Peer-reviewed journals means that before information is published, a group of experts in that field have reviewed the information and sign off on it as being valid. Now, obviously, that's the most reliable types of sources. So, but what I want are, I'm just going to say online sources. Notice that peer-reviewed, that would narrow it even more. Then I'm going to I just want articles. You don't really have time to read books, although I could look at book chapters, but since I can't check it out, it would have to be an ebook for me to be able to access it. Location doesn't matter because again, we don't have access to our library's physical holdings. Notice that it's giving a variety of subjects. I think I'm going to narrow it to social networks and cyberbullying. And then I want more recent information, so I'm going to change this to, let's say, 2015. So only things that have been published in the last 5 years. And scrolling down, I think that's enough, so I'm going to apply filters. And by checking those boxes, what happens now is I'm down to, out of 20,000, I'm down to about 1,000. That's still better, right? Okay, so I'm going to scroll through here. The next thing you need to look for is you want to make sure that it says full text available. Sometimes you can get just synopses of articles, just summaries, but you actually don't have access to the entire paper or article without having to pay more money or go to a different site. That doesn't interest me. So scrolling through here, how about this? Cyberbullying, insight and recommendations from youth, parents, and pediatricians. All right, I'm going to select full text available here. And notice that it gives me lots of options. One is how to cite the particular article, all right, or how to create a link to it, or I can print it, or I can email it to myself. But I want to go, notice that it gives me, shows me different places where this article is housed, different databases. So I'm just going to go with this first one. And again, it's taking a minute because right now we are high usage since everybody's doing work online. But now I have, here's the article that I wanted to see, all right? Now, a couple of things. First of all, a lot of times it will give you an abstract. The abstract, again, is a summary. I recommend that students read this abstract because if the language, you remember we did an exercise on diction, if the language is so complicated that it's hard to understand, if it's written at that formal highest level of diction, you can pretty much guarantee the entire article is written at that level as well. And so it may not be useful to you. As a matter of fact, the purpose of this study was to identify injunctive norms. Just that word injunctive kind of gives me an idea that this may be kind of written over my head or maybe written more for particular experts in this field. But for our purposes, I'm going to continue on just to show you what I want to show you here. You have two options. HTML full text simply means that what it does is it strips down any pictures, any graphs. You just get the words. PDF full text means it's essentially a picture of how that article looked when it was published. So I'm going to go ahead and select this. So that includes pictures and captions and graphs and charts and anything else that may have been included. Now I think that I'm waiting for this to load. And as I'm waiting for this to load, there it is. Okay, so this is how it actually appeared on the page. And there's the abstract and there are keywords and so forth. So I can read through here and again, just like I suspected, this was written, it's probably a social scientist, and it was written at a level that I'm going to have trouble maybe digging through it. But just to show you a few other things. Here down the right-hand side, we have these icons, okay? And the first one you can save to Google Drive, you can print, you can email. Here's the citation tool. This is very important, all right, because of course, in case I wanted to quote from this article. Now, the fact that I just visited it, I still need to, I would need to cite this in my annotated bibliography, even if I never intend to use this. But if you look at it and you kind of read through it, then you put it on your annotated bibliography, even if you don't think you're going to use it. Okay. Now, the citation tool shows me how to document this article, and I want to scroll until I find APA style, which is the style we're using. Then all you have to do is copy. So that's a Control C, or you can right click, of course, after you highlight it, and then you can paste it on. Yeah, I would recommend having a Microsoft Word document open and just paste it automatically into the Microsoft Word document. Okay. So that's how to use Primo to find articles. And when I'm finished with this, I can just X out of it and go back, and here is my search page. I want to show you something else as well. I alluded to this. I'm going back to library services. Now, the way that you get to the library homepage, you can simply type in library, www.library.gntc.edu, or under My GNTC, if you go to the GNTC homepage, under My GNTC, if you under My Resources, if you scroll down, there's library, and it too will take you to the homepage. Okay. I alluded to this particular source the other day, and I want to show it to you. You access it. It's a particular database that GNTC subscribes to, primarily because I use it so much, but I'm sure there are other English instructors who do as well. So under databases A to Z, scroll down to F for facts on file. This particular database contains a variety of different articles. They're not actually articles, they're more like reports, and it presents both sides of the issue. So it doesn't engage in argument about these issues. It simply actually presents both sides. It's very well researched, it's very accessible, it's easy to read, it's easy to follow. Now please hear me about this. This is a great place to start and get overviews of your topics. You can definitely use a facts on file article as one of your sources, but you should not build your entire paper from facts on file sources. You need to go beyond that, because I want you to get the experience of doing a broader search. Now, by the way, should you find that you need to change your topics, or you're having trouble coming up with a new issue, please notice that there are so many options here. They divide issues into categories, and then they have subcategories. Notice that just under family, teenagers, and community, there are 48 different issues. Okay, and all you have to do is select one. And there's our bullying issue. All right, I'm going to put in our search term here. Conduct a search, all right. And then notice we've got several hits, several articles. Most of these are recent, December 3rd, December 3rd. This one's older. That's one of the things, remember, that you want to look for. If your topic, if you really want, unless you're looking at the history of a topic, if you're really dealing with an issue that's current, you want current information, okay? So I'm going to select this one. This is a pro-con article. Again, what these particular articles or reports do is they don't take a side, but they present both sides equally. So each one always begins with the summary. Here's what supporters argue. Here's what opponents argue. Now, obviously, no one's going to support cyberbullying, but probably this is more about who should be addressing it. For example, supporters of this issue, should cyberbullies be prosecuted, are for the prosecution of people who are guilty of cyberbullying, which of course is bullying people online using some online platform. Opponents believe that schools and parents should handle it, not courts. All right. And then notice what you have is this rather lengthy report that presents both sides. Okay, it includes graphs, it includes charts, and then also really handy at the very end of it is a bibliography that contains all of the secondary sources used to create this primary source. I mean, these are the primary sources used to create, that should be backwards, used to create this secondary source. It's built off of all of this information. So you can actually find some more sources here that you can look for online. Okay. Also at the very bottom, please note, one of the frustrations about Facts on Files that doesn't actually give you the correct citation for APA style. It does for MLA, but all you need to do, if you're familiar enough with how to document something using APA formatting, you should realize that all you have to do is take this information and just put it in APA format. So the first thing you do is you take off the quotation marks, right? Because we don't use quotation marks around article titles in APA formatting. Then you don't capitalize some of the words. Cyberbullying would be, because it's the first word. Should would be capitalized because it's the first word after a colon, but cyberbullies should be lowercase, b lowercase, process lowercase. Then in APA formatting, we know that the date this was published would be second in parentheses. So after this title, you would put the parenthesis, December 3rd, 2019, close parenthesis, period, then issues and controversies, period, and then you would put your retrieval information. And MLA, it uses the word access, and it gives the date, and it gives the web address. In APA, remember, we use the word retrieved, and then the date that you visited this site from, and then you can just put this web address. Or you could just put Facts on File database. Okay? So hopefully this is a very handy source. If your topic's there, it's a great place to get information. It's a great place to start. Again, occasionally I have students who just build their entire papers from Facts on File issues, and I don't want to penalize them for that, but you need to broaden your search beyond just what you find in one database. Okay. Now we're going to talk about Google or a popular search engines. And the first thing I want to do is talk about Wikipedia. As you know, and as I'm sure I've said in the past, Wikipedia is not a source that you want to use to actually quote from in an academic college level paper. And again, that's because a wiki, W-I-K-I, by definition is a public site. You can get on here and change this. I can get on here and change this, change the information. As a matter of fact, you've probably seen, if you've ever used Wikipedia very much, and I use it as well, but you've probably seen that there are different sites, different pages on different topics where they invite people who have some authority to please add to this site. Okay. Now, Wikipedia does hire a variety of editors to try and verify the authenticity and credibility and accuracy of the information that's added, but you never know on any given day if that's been done yet. But here's what Wikipedia is good for. Sometimes the search is only as good as the search terms that you're using. So you'll notice that most Wikipedia pages, if you scroll close to the bottom, have see also. Okay, this can give you some additional search terms that you can put in a search bar to help you kind of broaden or even narrow your search if you're having trouble. Also, like if all I used was cyberbullying, I might miss some of this, like Gamergate controversy, right? Or cyber defamation law. There's a law, that's perhaps, or there are laws against cyberbullying. And then another thing that this is a valuable tool is if this is a credible page, it too has references lists. And so, again, you don't want to quote from Wikipedia, but if it's got reliable references, for example, the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry, that's a reliable reference, right? So I can go and take a look at this article. You can see where information has been built, was used to build this particular page. All right. Now let's talk about Google in general. And again, if I may be repeating some of the information that I've said in the past, but just to make sure that you understand, if you use a popular search engine like Google or Bing or others, Safari, then it's on you to make sure that your sources are credible. And we've talked about, I had that lesson on the fact that, for example, we know .govs, it's a government agency. So yeah, this would be considered credible. This would be considered credible. Pew Research Center, definitely considered credible. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it does a great deal of research and comes back with statistics. Now, when we get into these next sites, Pacer.org, I don't know who that is. Just because it's a .org does not mean that it's reliable. Okay, it used to mean a .org meant that it was the information came from a particular organization. That's no longer the case. Once again, a group with all it takes is a little money, and you can buy a .org. Helpguide.org, don't know what that is. Brainpop.com, who knows what that is? It's a commercial site. So you actually have to do additional research to make sure before you use any of these. And the way that you do that, again, is you can click on the site, and then Cyberbullying Research Center. Well, that sounds promising, but how do I know? Because it could be an entirely biased site, right? So one of the things that you want to do is you look for About Us. We've got pop-ups here. Get those off. All right. So far, it's not really giving me too much information so that I can check the validity of this particular source. Cyberbullying Research Center, and then it's telling me these are people it's worked with, but I'm not familiar with them either. It does say that it's featured, though, in some of these major publications or news organizations. Testimonials, recent media mentions. I'm still not comfortable with the source, though. It looks good, but it's not telling me who are these people who've put it together. What is this organization? Who's on their board, for example? Okay. So I would want to find out more, honestly. And perhaps if I Googled Cyberbullying Research Center and there was an article published in the New York Times or the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and I could sort of look at that and see if they have determined it to be credible. But just this is not enough. It's not telling me enough about who these people are. Okay. Does that make sense? So honestly, again, this is the harder way to do this. Not the easier, the harder way, because it does require, and honestly, if we go back to our cyberbullying page, where I just Googled cyberbullying on Google, I got 20 million hits. All right. We know buried in here is all types of good information, but most students never go past the first page, right? And there are pages and pages and pages and pages. Okay. How many people go beyond page 1? Maybe page 2, but that's pretty much it. So again, a good researcher really kind of goes after the best information he or she can find. Finally, I want to mention this particular source. I know a lot of high schools use Google Scholar. I find it a little bit more difficult to use, but you do know you're getting reliable information here. With Google Scholar, I'm going to put in my, And notice it immediately pops up all these different options: effects, social media and schools, prevention, bullying. And let me see what I can find about bullying statistics. Okay, and the one thing that I guess I don't like as much about Google Scholar is it doesn't let me refine my search as much as I could in Primo. I'm going to put anything since, let's go since 2019. Important considerations, real-time cyberbullying. Now, a lot of times, what these articles will do is it will take you to a site and then you either have to somehow join something to have access, or you have to pay a fee. But let's see if we can find. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it's taking me to this particular topic. Another issue with using Google Scholar is it does not give you it doesn't use the citation tool and do the actual format for you. So that's something to consider as well. All right, hopefully this video provides enough information for you to really get started, to have a variety of resources at your fingertips to be able to pull together a well-developed, carefully supported argument about your particular issue. Please don't hesitate to email me if you've got questions.